I'm gonna give you my 5 favorite spots to bluff in live poker. These are the spots where you're just going to get it through almost every time. If you want to turn up the aggression in your game, boost your red line, and increase your bluffing frequency and success, stay tuned. I've got you covered. 2 quick notes before we get started. Number 1, the best bluff is actually the bluff where they call the flop, call the turn, and then fold the river. It's nice to get them to fold right now. It feels great, but we actually make a lot more money if they call a couple of times and then fold on the river. Delayed gratification. Number 2, if you can help it, don't show your bluffs. Whenever you get one through, shake your head, tap the table, and go, I guess I got a little bit too greedy. Continue to let your opponents think you are a tight-knit and bluff their pants off at every opportunity. Remember, it's hard to make good hands. For context, my name is Marc Goone. I played poker full-time for over 5 years. I started at $1, $2, worked my way up, played as big as $200, $400, and netted over 7 figures along the way. All right, without further ado, let's jump right in. My top 5 favorite spots to bluff in live poker. Number 5, when they range bet wide versus wide. All right, let's jump right in. All these hands are gonna be $2-5, $1,000 effective. We open 10-9 of diamonds in the cutoff. Button 3 bets to 65, and we call. We're going to a flop ace-8-5 with a couple of spades and a diamond out there. We check it over to the button, and button is going to c-bet just over 1/3 pot. I think this spot just gets over c-bet. Most players in this situation are just going to simplify, and they're going to range bet 1/3 pot here, and I think we can just attack that quite a bit. I think by just check raising here on the flop, with pretty much anything going on, any type of low equity draw, any type of 3 to a backdoor straight draw, flush draw, when we have 10 high here, it's just very, very advantageous for us to fold king highs, queen highs, jack highs, pocket kings through pocket tens, just getting a ton of folds here when the player on the button is going to be range betting. Now, if they do choose a bigger size here, I would not go for the check raise. If this is an early versus early spot, say EP versus MP, I would not go for this check raise. Wide versus wide, when they're going to be 3-betting quite a lot of hands pre-flop, button versus cutoff, I think we can attack this quite a bit here. Go for the check raise, and if they do call here, that probably means they do have a hand like ace-x, spades, 2-pair, something like that. So if they do call here, we mostly just give up unless we pick up additional equity on the turn. If we pick up a diamond, if we pick up a 7, if we pick up a jack, those would be spots I would consider continuing barreling. And also, maybe quite possibly if a spade came on the turn. This is not going to be a spot where I'm likely running 3 street bluffs, but I think by just going for the simple check raise on the flop, we can just print a ton of EV here against players who are going to be range betting in the spot where in equilibrium, they are absolutely not supposed to be range betting wide versus wide here, even on an ace high board. All right, guys, real quick, I'm trying to give you as much sauce as possible to improve your win rate for free. If you're enjoying the videos, if you think they are helping your win rate, please, 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 all I ask, hit that subscribe button. Thank you, guys. Have a gentle day. My number 4 favorite spot to bluff in live poker, on a wet dynamic board with a clean run out. All right, so let's look at this one here. We open it up on the button with 7-6 of diamonds, and the villain in the big blind calls, Jack 9 deuce. Look at that flop right there. One of my favorite flops, if I must say so myself. He checks it over to us, and I'm going to choose a size where they raise off their strong shit and call with their weak shit. So I want to choose a size here on the flop where they're going to raise off their pocket 9s, their jack 9 suited, their pocket deuces at a high frequency, but also choose a size small enough where they're going to continue with hands like pocket 8s with a spade, 10-7 of hearts, hands like that. So we go half pot here and they call. Now going to the turn, the question I ask on the turn is, are they capped? And if yes, I usually choose a big size, and if no, I go for the smaller size. So on this turn, are they capped? Yes, in general, they are capped on this turn, especially on wet dynamic boards. They'd probably be raising off 2-pair and sets at a high frequency. So the best hands they usually have on this turn is a hand like ace jack. So I'm going to go for the very big size on this turn because they are capped. They're not going to be putting in more money for us, even if we bet small here. And I'm going to choose a small size because I think they are inelastic. They're just going to be continuing here all the time with jack X, with flush draws, with open and straight draws. So I'm going to choose a big size here on the turn, go nearly 2x, and now they call. We go to the river, which is another blank. Now they check to us. I think this is one of the best spots to bluff in live poker. Why? Because they are just so capped. They just don't get to the river here with almost any strong hands. Now, could they occasionally have a hand like pocket 4s? Sure, sometimes. Could they occasionally have a hand like 5-6 of spades? Sure, sometimes. So do we run into a wall occasionally? Okay, sure. Maybe 1 to 2% of the time. But in general, usually the best hand they have getting to this river is a hand like ace jack or king jack. And the question I like to ask on this river, if we had a hand like pocket kings here or pocket aces, would we be going all in to target ace jack? Usually not. Usually not. We would not be going over 2x pot here on this river to target ace jack. Why? Because we just think ace jack is going to fold a lot. You've probably seen this in your games. Guys get to this river with aces or kings or queens, and they just bet 2/3 pot or pot. Why do people usually choose that sizing on the river? Because they're trying to get called by ace jack. If we're not going 2x pot for value here against ace jack, then we have to use logic here, pull on that thread. That means we think ace jack is going to fold if we go all in. So aha, this seems like a pretty good spot to bluff a hand like ace jack, king jack, queen jack, and just jam for all the money. We are going to jam on this river and get the fold. And again, my number 4 favorite spot to bluff in live poker on a wet dynamic board with a clean run out. Number 3 favorite spot to bluff in live poker. When the flush comes in on the turn, we bet small and they check call. So let's look at an example here. We open up 7-6 of diamonds on the button and the big blind's going to call, go to a flop, jack 9 deuce. They check it over to us. We see bet half pot here. Again, we're choosing the size where they raise their strong shit and call with the weak shit. Half pot on the flop, they call. Now on the turn, the question I ask when they check to us is, are they capped? Where in the previous hand, there was an offsuit 4 on the turn. We answered yes, they were capped. In this example, they are not capped because they're just not going to raise off a ton of their flush draws on the flop. Even if they raise off some of their combo draws, they're still going to get to this turn with a ton of flushes. So we need to bet small again to incentivize them here to raise off a bunch of their flushes and also to continue with a wider, weaker range. When we bet small on this turn, they're going to A, raise off a lot of the time when they have their king high, queen high, 8 high flushes, and they are also going to continue with a bunch of relatively weak hands if we bet small enough. Hands like pocket 8s with a spade or queen 10 of hearts. We are going to bet small on this turn, just under half pot, and when they check call on the turn, again, we have the green light. Very, very good spot to bluff on this river, and if our opponent does have a hand like ace jack or king jack, I think this is a much easier sell to get them to fold. We don't have to go as big on this river as we did in the previous hand to get them to fold top pair, top kicker because the front door flush draw came in. On top of that, we probably don't want to go as big. It's just not as efficient. They're not always going to raise off their flushes on the turn. In particular, the hands villains like to trap in this spot is the nut flush because they just feel somewhat invulnerable. And we just don't need to go absolutely crazy here to get a hand like ace jack to fold. Again, if our opponent flipped over a hand like ace jack and we were trying to go for value and we had a hand like ace queen of spades here, I'd be asking, okay, what size do we need to bet with our flush to get ace jack to call? We'd probably have to go relatively small here. Maybe $80, maybe $100 max if we're getting a little bit greedy against ace jack. Well, ace jack's probably going to fold all the time if we go pot or a small overbet here. I think just going with a small overbet is going to get all their single pair hands to fold all the time, and then you don't necessarily have to lose a 2x or 3x pot overbet here when they do show up with a flush 1 out of 20 times. So again, my number 3 favorite spot to bluff in live poker here, when the flush comes in on the turn and they check call. My number 2 favorite spot to bluff in live poker, when the flop goes check check and the turn is an ace. All right, let's look at an example here. This one we're gonna play from the big blind as the pre-flop caller. So villain opens on the button. We defend in the big blind with queen 10. Flop comes jack 9 deuce, open-ended here. And now the villain is going to check back. Ace comes on the turn, and I think a lot of players' instinct in this spot, getting here with no showdown value, is just to stab the turn. And I wanna talk about why this is a mistake. If we bet this turn, the villain's gonna fold any hands that are air that check back the flop, which is fine, but they're just gonna have a lot of ace X in their range. And if we go bet, they're just going to go call, call. Now let's think about what happens if we check here. The villain on the button is going to bet almost all of their ace X hands that check back the flop. So they have ace king, ace queen, ace 5 suited. All of those hands are probably going to put in a bet for value at this point. Now, also, if they had air that decided to check back the flop, say a hand like 7-6 of diamonds, and they just didn't want to run a 3 street bluff with a hand with no equity, well, they're also probably going to bet their air on this card too, because when the ace comes, it looks like it's a good card for them, and we've checked again. So when we check here, they're going to bet their ace X and they're going to bet their air. They're mostly not going to have hands like sets and 2 pair when they check back this flop. They're not going to have a hand like ace jack. I would posit even a hand like ace 9 is going to bet the flop at a high frequency. While they could have a hand like ace deuce or something like that here occasionally, mostly their range is going to be single pair ace X and air. And I feel pretty good about making that range fold by the river. So checking here when we have a semi bluff is almost always the play on the turn after the flop goes check check. So we check to them on the turn. They are going to put in a bet at a high frequency as expected here. And now we're going to go for the check raise. And when I'm thinking about check raise sizing on the turn here, the air is going to fold whatever size we check raise. So throw the air out. We don't care about the air. Now I'm thinking about what is the biggest size we can check raise that a hand like ace queen or ace 10 calls. I want the the ace X to call on the turn, because all of those hands we can get to fold on the river, provided we have enough stack depth behind. But I think 160 is a size where ace king and ace queen, maybe even ace 10, those hands are just going to come along for the ride at a high frequency. So they call here, we go to the river, which is a nice blank. If we had deuces here and we were trying to get called by ace king, I don't think we could go all in. I don't think ace king wants to play for stacks here. We'd probably want to choose a size around pot, maybe a little bit over pot here to try to get ace king to call. So when we're bluffing here, let's just put all the money in and ensure that ace king, ace queen, ace 10 folds all the time. So we're going to put all the money in here. They are going to fold. And again, my number 2 favorite spot to bluff in live poker, when the flop goes check, check, and the turn is an ace. And finally, my number 1 favorite spot to bluff in live poker, when our opponent donks the flop as the pre-flop caller. So let me show you an example here. We open up on the button to 20 bucks. The opponent's gonna call in the big blind, jack 9 deuce. And now our opponent donks for half pot. And every time this happens, I'm just thinking in my head, ooh, I get to win this pot. I think you'll see a lot of regs start raising here. I don't necessarily think that's the best play, because when our opponents donk, what do they have? They normally just have a bunch of weak crap, right? Maybe they could have some middle pair. Maybe they have some draws. Maybe they have some air. Maybe they have some weak top pair. Maybe they have an under pair. So I like to just call here with both my bluffs and my value. I'm floating my entire range here on the flop. We let them continue value betting when they have a weak jack occasionally. And also we let them continue bluffing with whatever BS they have here. So I'm just going to call here. We go to a 4 on the turn. Now our opponent checks. And when they check, I'm going to be thinking, what size can I bet here to get a hand like 9x or pocket 8s or a weak draw like a gut shot to continue calling? I don't think they have a lot of jack X at this point. Jack X would mostly donk bigger, or it would check on the flop, or it would continue betting on the turn. So we can rule out jack X a lot of the time. It's going to be 9x at best and a bunch of weak draws and BS. So I don't think we can go too big here. So I'm going to choose a 2/3 pot size here. The villain is going to call. Now we go to the river, which is a nice blank. They check. And at this point, again, we think the best hand they have is something like 9x. So what do we do on this river? We just go big. We get all the 9x to fold. If we were value betting here, we'd have to go very, very small. So I think on this river, when we are bluffing, we can just go pretty big and get them to fold almost all the time. All right, one more example when donking here. And you may be wondering, well, what happens if they donk the flop and then continue betting on the turn? So here's what I'm going to do in that scenario. So they donk the flop, we call, turn is a blank. And now in this spot, they're going to continue donking for half pot on the turn. I am going to start putting in a lot of raises here on the turn. And when they donk twice, I think the range is going to be a little bit stronger than before, where they donk flop and check turn. They're still going to have a bunch of air. They're still going to have a bunch of BS. But now I think at this point, they could have some weak jack X, right? They could have some queen jack. They could have some jack 10, jack 8 suited, stuff like that. So I don't want to go too big here, because I want those hands to call so I can get them to fold on the river. So I'm going to raise here 4x. I normally don't advocate for the 3 or 4x raise size, but I think their range is so weak here, we need to go a little bit smaller to entice them to call. So they're going to go for the call. We get the blank on the river. They check, and you know what's coming. If we were value betting here, they flipped over a hand like jack 10, and we had a hand like pocket kings here. What size would we need to go to get jack 10 to call? Well, I'm not sure we could put in all the money after we take this strong of a line. They donk the flop, we call. They donk the turn, we raise. And now they check the river. If we put in all the money here, I think jack 10 or jack 8 suited or something like that is just folding all the time if we go 2x pot. So to get jack 10 to fold, what do? Well, we simply put in all the money, ensure that a hand like jack 8 suited, jack 10, even queen jack folds all the time here. We put in all the money, they fold. So my number 1 favorite spot to bluff in live poker, when the pre-flop caller donks on the flop. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite spots to bluff in live poker. Hopefully this can increase your red line, your bluffing frequency, and your bluffing success. Thank you guys, and have a gentle day.